Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Side Projects. This one is all about the eighth wonder of the world, the Rock-Hewn churches of Lalibela. And just before you spout up in the comments, actually Simon, the eighth wonder of the world is this, in my opinion. There are, I'm sure, many eighth wonders of the world, and this is just one of them, and it also makes a really good title that you're more likely to click on. Thank you for being here. The seven wonders of the world have been argued over for millennia since the first list was created in ancient Greece more than 2,000 years ago. Of all the different entries, there's one fantastic site that is consistently and inexplicably left off. The Rock-Hewn churches of Lalibela. Found in northern Ethiopia, the beautiful churches hold a unique place in the hearts of Christians throughout much of Africa, serving as something of a holy city to African Christians. However, the thing that genuinely differentiates Lalibela's churches from so many others is how they were built. In fact, in a way, they weren't built at all. The 11-church complex was carved entirely from a single massive piece of stone. Instead of protruding from the earth, the structures sit beneath the terrain with their rooftops barely reaching ground level. According to some, it was literally the most challenging way to build them. Today, no one is exactly sure how they were made. Some people even suggest that it was through a sort of divine intervention. It wasn't. They just built them. Don't underestimate people. However, after almost 1,000 years since their completion, keeping the churches in good condition has become a real test. Whether or not the Rock-Hewn chapels ever become an official world wonder, they certainly inspire the feelings of one. So let's get into it. Ethiopia has a long history as a strong Christian nation. A little over 60% of the population identifies Christian. Though that's not the highest percentage in Africa, it is something of an outlier in the Horn of Africa, where other religions like Islam are far more prominent. Still, Ethiopians have a claim to being the first Christian nation in the world. As far back as about 330 AD, Ethiopia's ruler, King Azana of Aksum, declared the country's full conversion to Christianity. However, Ethiopia's religious roots run even deeper than that. The society is mentioned by name in the Bible, as in the book of Acts, Philip the Evangelist describes converting Ethiopians to his religion. The faithful believe that the biblical Queen of Sheba left Ethiopia for Jerusalem, where she met King Solomon. From that meeting came a son, and as an adult, that son returned to Ethiopia with 12,000 Israelites and the Ark of the Covenant, which contained God's 10 Commandments. And I've just learned more about religion than I ever thought I would learn. Whether these stories are entirely accurate, they're probably not entirely accurate. They were written a really long time ago. Most of the nation's rulers kept this strong religious tradition in the following centuries. The first Christian church was built during the Aksumite Empire in the 6th century AD. The ruler who commissioned it, King Caleb, lived in Roha, the township that would eventually become Lalibela. The area got its name from a ruler from the Zagwe dynasty several centuries later, King Gebremeskel Lalibela, who lived from about 1162 to 1221 AD, ruling for the final 30 years of his life. He was a devoutly religious man, so devout in fact that during his life he completed the pilgrimage from Ethiopia to Jerusalem, more than 2,500 kilometers away. He found serenity in the holy city and wanted his citizenry to have the same experience for themselves. Jerusalem was conquered by the Muslim Ayyubid Sultanate around 1190, led by Sultan Saladin. Recognizing that Ethiopian Christians would never have a chance to visit the holy city, Lalibela dedicated himself to building a new Jerusalem in Roha. Not only would his project establish the town as a center for Christianity, but it would be modeled after Jerusalem itself. It's impossible to understand the process behind the decision to dig the churches from stone, but from a geological perspective, it's quite simple to see how it was possible. 30 million years ago, the Ethiopian highlands rose when fissures in the earth flooded the entire Horn of Africa with lava several kilometers deep. Due to a chemical reaction between the hardened lava and other gases and minerals in the area, the cool volcanic rock was easy to mold with a chisel. In the area around Raha, about 600 kilometers north of Addis Ababa, this cooled lava forms a single gigantic stone covering much of the land. It seems likely that before Lalibela's time, people understood that structures could be made by chiseling away at rock. Some archaeologists suggest that the earliest of the Rock-Hewn churches was actually created centuries before Lalibela's rule. However, the local oral tradition is that the king oversaw the entire construction process in 24 years and was aided either directly or indirectly by angels. Most people agree that the construction must have taken place over a series of long phases, possibly lasting centuries. And that, ladies and gentlemen, seems a little bit more likely. Regardless, Lalibela came up, it's like, no, it was angels. How did you make angels? Regardless, Lalibela came up with a plan to build a complex with a layout reminiscent of Jerusalem. He even named several geological features after the Holy City's landmarks like the River Jordan. Workers started the project by tracing the structure's perimeter on the rock surface. They excavated downward while isolating the building's skeleton. Then the angels came in and not really. Once they reached the base of the church, they would go about sculpting the interior and refining the exterior with the assistance of I'm going to stop. The result was a complex of 11 buildings. The majority are found in two main groups. To the north and west of the Jordan River are 5 churches: the House of the Savior of the World, the House of Mary, the House of the Cross, the House of the Virgins, and the House of the Golgotha Mikhael. Okay then. On the southeast side of the river are 5 more: the House of Emmanuel, the House of Mercurius, the House of Abbot Libanos, the House of Gabriel Raphael, and the House of Holy Bread. Okay then. A few hundred meters to the west of both of these groups is the lone House of St. George, considered by most to be the jewel in the complex's crown. The largest of the churches, the House of the Savior of the World, covers about 750 square meters. All of the structures include unique design and world-class craftsmanship, especially considering the lack of proper tools. While there's an angel's joke there is I'm not going to do it. While the rock is easily chiseled, it required immense precision, as a single misplaced hammer could have compromised the structure's integrity. From the outside looking in, though, the buildings are all pictures of exactitude. The exterior walls are smooth and marked with doors facing each direction. The windows take many shapes, showing that the builders were committed to more than just function. They wanted to create something beautiful. Inside, many of the walls are rough, but that doesn't mean the handiwork isn't still astonishing. The interior is decorated by arcaded ceilings and barrel vaults, which in traditional churches serve a structural purpose along with a decorative one. In these churches, they're just purely decorative. The floors are covered in rugs, and every story is separated into multiple levels, each one serving a different purpose in various religious ceremonies. Most of the interior walls are bare, except for the houses of Golgotha and Mary, which include bas-reliefs and colorful paintings of biblical scenes. All of the churches are either rectangular or cruciform. The House of St. George's symmetrical cross shape is perhaps the most iconic image of the entire complex. The churches themselves are far from the project's only engineering achievement, though. To avoid flooding, builders had to construct a series of drainage canals and trenches. The church's roofs were built at a slight angle so water would run off and into the drainage ducts. Other hydraulic systems were included to fill cisterns and baptismal pools. These systems had to be absolutely perfect, as excessive rainwater was the greatest threat to the building's integrity. Following the complex's completion, King Lalibela was hailed as a local hero. The town of Roha was renamed in his honor, which bears his name to this day. While the churches of Lalibela hold an essential place in Ethiopian Christianity, it wasn't always apparent that they would become such meaningful religious symbols. At first, several of the structures, they weren't even chapels. The houses of Gabriel and Saint Mercurius were used as fortresses or royal palaces for at least a few decades. However, as the site grew in religious stature, all of the buildings were converted to churches. You can never have enough churches, apparently. Now they're used for religious ceremonies throughout the year, including regular chapel services and as homes for the clergy. The church's most important use is as a site of pilgrimage for religious followers in the region. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people ascend to the 2,500-meter Ethiopian highlands to descend into Lalibela's churches. The trek is typically done on foot, no matter how far adherents travel. Many of them fast throughout the journey to steep themselves in the tradition of Christ. Sounds really uncomfortable. The gathering is called Jenna, and it's essentially the Orthodox Christian version of Christmas. Some ceremonies and feasts take place on December the 25th, yet the holiest day is January the 7th, the date most Orthodox religions claim Christ was born. On the day before Jenna, tens of thousands of followers crowd the churches through the night, praying and otherwise expressing their reverence and faith until the day of Jenna finally arrives. When watching these ceremonies, the layout, design, and architectural aspects seem to shine through with a coherent representation of religious themes. Worshippers descend down a single ramp into the complex. To some, this represents their future ascent into heaven. Many claim this was the reason for digging into the earth. The prospect of building a raised series of churches was out of the question, so builders used the resources at their disposal to create separation between the place of worship and the temporal world. Once inside the complex, a single kilometer-long tunnel, that's insane for how long ago these were built, connects the churches. In some areas, the tunnel forces travelers to walk single file to get from one site to another. It even runs beneath the man-made River Jordan that crosses the complex. Incredible. To many of the Ethiopian Orthodox faithful, Lalibela has become the holiest site in their faith. Some will only make the pilgrimage once in a lifetime. With all of this increased use, though, there come a new set of challenges. Preservation. Given its vital role in religious tradition, the challenge of preserving the churches of Lalibela has become quite a project in its own right. For almost 1,000 years, the churches were entirely exposed to the elements. This meant that rain poured down on the buildings' roofs, draining down their walls. This exposure has led to the gradual degradation of the walls, but the process has been sped up in recent decades with increased use. Drainage ditches were disrupted by seismic activity in the region, which threatened water buildup until the systems were updated in the 20th century. As a result, every one of the 11 churches is now considered to be in critical condition. One of the biggest challenges with the preservation is the idea that the church was built by angels. Since its inclusion as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1978, outsiders have come to the area to work on the preservation effort. Sometimes critical structural repairs call for drilling holes into the rock to fit a straightening pin. However, every single change to the construction requires approval by local priests. When holes are drilled, the dust is collected by clerics. As rugs and murals begin to degrade, a lengthy process is required to retouch them. However, the biggest challenge to preservation has been the apparent flaws in execution. The Authority for Research and Conservation of Cultural Heritage, ARCCH, struggled to communicate the project's scope to the locals, and the miscommunication has led to some poor decisions. With outside funding, ARCCH erected 4 shelters to protect 5 of the churches from rain and other elements. But these structures have created their own problems. For the first time in 900 years, the churches are no longer being rained on, and the rock surfaces are drier than ever. The shelters have remained far longer than initially anticipated, and this lack of hydration is causing more structural damage to the churches. It seems you just can't win. One building, the House of Emmanuel, is at risk of imminent collapse. Further, onlookers now fear that the shelters themselves are at risk of collapsing, which would surely mean the demise of the churches below them. The ARCCH director has admitted that the covers must be removed, but today there are no concrete plans for that to happen or what's going to happen once they're removed. Preservation hasn't been a complete failure, though. Some organizations have focused on training locals on how to best deal with the materials. Many of the churches have received waterproof layers which protect them from water damage without drying out the stone. Improved drainage systems have also reduced the wear and tear caused by water. The situation is tense, but most observers believe that with the right execution, the churches can be restored and strengthened and could last for another 1,000 years. Besides its religious significance, the church's preservation has become essential for maintaining the history of Ethiopia. The nation thrived during the Middle Ages when much of the world struggled with famine and war. Whether or not it ever officially becomes a world wonder, it should continue to stand as a symbol of the ingenuity of those who built it and the faithful devotion of its worshippers. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, smash that like button below. If you've got a suggestion or suggestions for future side projects video, leave them in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching.